big schus.
Thank you, Avitiel. Thank you for all your efforts during this period of time. It's really magnificent what you've done for the shul. And I want you to know it's greatly appreciated. You know, giving this Pirkei Avot Shiur on Sunday is a little like eating chomd on Tuesday. It's all there, all the ingredients, but it doesn't taste the same. But in fact, the Gemara tells us that there was a Roman that liked Jewish food so much that he ate the Shabbos meal on Tuesday, and he told the rabbi that something was missing. And the rabbi said there was one ingredient that was missing, and that was Shabbat. So we cannot, in the present circumstances, include Shabbat, but I hope that all the ingredients are here for a meaningful discussion regarding some of the ideas that exist here in Pirkei Avot. Last year we did the first two chapters, as I'm certain that all of you remember. So we're going to begin with the third chapter this year and see, God willing, how far we progress. The third chapter begins Akavia ben Mahalalel Omer. Now, this is a famous Mishnah. Unfortunately, we're well accustomed to it because it is recited by the Chevra Kadisha at the Rahman funerals. But it bears, I think, a great deal of study, not just the superficial meaning. And one of the ideas that I always felt is important when we speak about Avot is to know who the people were that said these things, because the Mishnah is not anonymous. The Mishnah quotes everyone their own different opinions. And in so doing, the Mishnah itself wants to indicate that there's a connection between the person and between what the person said. So we could have a generic Pirkei Avos, that just says the ideas that are expressed without attributing them to any particular individual. But the Mishnah didn't want to do that. The Mishnah wanted us to know who said what, because by understanding who said what, we have a glimmer of understanding of why that person said that idea. And so therefore there's that connection here. Now the name Akavia, most of the commentators feel that Akavia is the same name as Akiva. And there's a discussion in fact in Halacha as to whether Akiva is a Hebrew name or an Aramaic name, non-Jewish name that drifted into Jewish tradition. So we have countless names like that were certainly not Jewish or Hebraic in origin, but have been adopted and adapted by the Jewish people. So that became a Jewish name. So like Feivel is a Jewish name, whereas we don't think that Philip is. Though what's the difference between Feivel and Philip? One is German and one is English. Nevertheless, Akiva, if it is a Hebrew name, then it is spelled Ayin Kuf Yud Beis Hey. All Hebrew names that end in that sound of awe end in a hey. If it is an Aramaic name, non-Jewish name, then the name ends in an aleph. Ayin Kuf Yud Beis Aleph. Now, in the printers of the Mishnah, the Gemara, etc., always spell Akiva with an aleph at the end, meaning that Akiva basically is not a Hebrew name, and that it was somehow a name, maybe Aramaic, that drifted into the Jewish world, and Akiva ben Yosef was called by that name, Rabbi Akiva. If we say, however, that Akiva and Akavia are the same name, Akavia is always spelled with a hey at the end, because Akavia means Akev, in the footsteps, call of God. The person was named by his parents in the hope that that child would walk in the footsteps, Kaviyachal, of the Ribono Shel Olam. And we find throughout the Torah, Akev Asher Tishmu Bekoli, Avram Avinu was Akev. So Akev always means because, but it also means the heel, the footstep. It's a way of following God. And God, so to speak, has trodden the path for us. He's shown us the way. Mahu rachum, afato rachum, mahu chanun, afato chanun. Good traits are heavenly traits. And we attempt, it's called, in Latin, they call it imitatio Dei, imitating God. That is really what the mitzvot are all about. It's, we say Hashem, Hashem, Kevarachum, Bechadu, Nerechapayim, Rav Chesed, Behemes, and we want to say that about ourselves. To the extent that we are, to that extent that we recognize godliness that exists within us. And we all know that children, when they're young, want to imitate their parents. When they're older, then they imitate others. But most of life is imitation. We are somehow following somebody, whether it's an idea or a personality or a goal or a mission. But we're walking in footsteps, and so the name Akiva, which is spelled with an aleph, really should be spelled with a hey at the end. And in fact, we find the rabbinic tradition for that. There was a Rav in the 14th century in Vienna, Rabbi Yitzchak Or Zarua, and he wrote a famous work called Or Zarua. And Or Zarua is taken from the verse in Tehillim, Or Zarua la tzadik u'liyishrei leiv simcha. Their light is implanted for the righteous, and for those who are just of heart, there is goodness and happiness. And this verse, he says, refers to Rabbi Akiva, because the last letters of the words in the verse spell Rabbi Akiva. Or is the resh for Rabbi, Zorua is ayin, Latzadik is kuf, Liyishrei is yud, Leiv is beis, Simcha is hey. And he says from there we have a proof that Akiva is really a Hebrew name, and that it should be spelled with a hey at the end and not with an aleph. I remember when I was a rabbi in Miami Beach many decades ago. So when we had to grant a divorce, a rabbinic divorce, the Beis Din, so we had two witnesses who always signed on the get, on the divorce. They were very well trained. They were fine Jews. one of them was named Akiva. And he always spelled Akiva with a hey. And I remember every time that we sent the divorce to another community to be delivered to the woman, the rabbi, many of the rabbis in the other communities who were, for some reason, unaware of this piece in the Or Zarua, would write back and say the divorce is invalid because the witness signed the wrong name. He can't spell his own name. Spelled it with a hey and not with an aleph. And I would gently remind them that it was not a problem and that he should research it in the Or Zarua, and he would see that Akiva's with a hey, and that would be fine. So Akavia is also the same discussion. Is it a Hebrew name? Is it a non-Hebrew name? And most of the printers decided that it was a Hebrew name, and therefore they spell it with a hey at the end. Now, Akavia ben Mahalalel is a fascinating character in the Mishnah. The main discussion regarding him is in the Mishnayot of Ediot. And the Mishnah there tells us that he said 4 rulings in halacha, and that his rulings were not accepted. And the majority voted against his rulings. But he never recanted. He never said, I was wrong. Now, he was offered the position of being the head of the Sanhedrin by his colleagues on the condition that he recant these 4 halachas, because the majority opinion was against him. And he refused. And they said to him, don't you understand the offer? You'll be the head of the Sanhedrin. And there's a majority against you. In other words, you have a rationale. Now, all of us have a rationale when we give in. We usually give in for what we call a higher purpose. Well, I'm going to take the money anyway because I'm going to give it to charity. Or I'm going to, I don't want to start disputes. I don't want to be a loner. All right, so I'll give in. But he refused to give in. And he said a famous statement. He said, Mutav, better that I should be called a fool in this world, because everybody will say, look at him, he's nuts. You want a fool? He could be the head of the Sanhedrin, and instead, he gives it up because he thinks that this is what the halacha is. And he said, better to be a fool in this world than I should be not true to myself in front of the Creator. That I should do what I think is wrong against the Creator simply for my personal benefit. So he never became the head of the Sanhedrin. Now, the Talmud continues the story. It becomes even more drastic and dramatic. There's an opinion that he was placed in Cherem. The rabbi said, well, if he doesn't give in, we're always afraid that there'll be different Torahs amongst Jewish people, which is a tendency that exists even till today, to fragment the Torah, to fragment the Jewish people. If one Jewish people is good, then 2 are even better. Why not? But the rabbis were well aware of the dangers of fragmentation. They were well aware that you shouldn't split it that way. So therefore, they said, either recant or we're going to ban you. And he refused, and so one opinion is that they banned him. There are commentators Rishonim who say they didn't really ban him, but they threatened to do so. And that since he never actually preached publicly that the halacha was like him, he never really acted upon his opinion, so to speak. He maintained his opinion, but he didn't act upon it. So but it was a serious matter, a matter that could have been brought to be banned. The Gemara tells us there was a case, Shmaya and Avtalion, who were the two mentors of Hillel. So Shmaya and Avtalion were Gerim. They were converts. Either they were converts or they were descended, but they were considered converts. And the Talmud says that there was a case of a woman who was also a convert that came before them, and they judged that she was an unfaithful wife, and therefore they took the waters of the Sota, where the parchment of the name of God was dissolved, and gave it to her to drink. And that was a controversial decision. And he disagreed with it, Akavia. Some of the Gemara there says a dugma, that it was only an example. So there the question is, what does it mean, dugma? So some say that because they were Gerim, they were very sensitive to the fact that some people didn't consider Gerim to be really Jewish. So they wanted to make an example here to show you that a Giores, a female convert, is 100% Jewish, and as such, all the laws apply to her as well. Others say dugma, it means that it was only, again, theoretical. In practical terms, they didn't do anything. A whole discussion there. But anyway, he disagreed with them. And he never recanted. So the Talmud tells us there in the Mishnah in Edios that at the end of his life, he instructed his son that his son should not follow his own rulings in these matters, but rather follow the rulings of the majority of the rabbis. So the son asked him, Pa, if that's the case, why didn't you? Why do you tell me that I should be practical? Why didn't you do it? So he answered, Ani shomati min amarubin, ve'hem shomu min amarubin. I heard my halachas, I heard tradition that we were the majority. And the Chachamim who disagreed with me, they had a tradition that the opposite opinion was the majority. So the dispute was, who was the majority? And we know that Yochid v'Rabim, Halacha k'Rabim, that if there's a majority and a minority, we always follow the majority. And in following the majority, so that's why they disagreed with me, and I disagreed with them because I said I was the majority. But you, my child, you didn't hear from a majority. You only heard from me. I'm the last one standing. Ato shamata min hayochid. You only heard it from one, from me. So Rabbim v'yochid halacha k'Rabbim. So therefore, you have to recant. You therefore have to back off. You therefore have to follow the majority, because I could maintain that I was the majority because I heard it from many. But you who never heard it from anyone else but me, you certainly cannot say you heard it from a majority, and therefore you have to give in. So the son said to him, before you pass away, say a few kind things to me, to your colleagues, so that I would be accepted amongst them. In other words, give me a haskoma, give me some approbation that they'll think that I'm worthy. And Akavia remains Akavia till the end, even with his own child. Because who would not give his own child a letter or a good word? Or to say, that he is the one to be accepted and included in the pantheon of the great rabbis of the time. But Akavia refused. Akavia said to him the famous statement that reverberates throughout Jewish history, Ma'asecha yikarvucha, ma'asecha yirachakucha. It's up to you. Your behavior, your knowledge, your intelligence, what you do, Karvucha will bring you close to them. They'll recognize you. They'll say, what a wonderful person. And Ma'asecha yirachakucha. And if you behave differently, you don't adhere to these principles, so naturally they'll stay away from you. But it's up to you. It's not up to me. There's a great tradition in the Jewish people called yichus. Oh, I'm descended. So we're all descended from great people. Every one of us. So therefore, I'm a miyuchas. I'm special. They say the famous quip that a chassid once came to the Kotzker Rebbe, Reb Menachem Mendel Morgenstern, who was famous for taking no prisoners. And he bragged to him that he's a grandson of this and this great person. So he said, Ich bin a Rebbe she'einikel. I'm a grandson of a great Hasidic Rebbe. Therefore, you should treat me with respect. The Kotzker said to him, Esav is a Rebbe she'einikel. Esav also had a great grandfather, right? He's a grandson of Avram Avinu, right? That's what that doesn't cut in the ice here. It's Ma'asecha Yikarvucha, Ma'asecha Yirachakucha. Whatever you do, that's what you are. So if you want to be Esav, it's not going to help that you're from Avram Avinu. Not only will it help, it hurts. All of the great secularists and atheists and anti-Jewish and anti-Israeli people all are great descendants of great people. But it doesn't help. Ma'asecha yirachakucha. We find that throughout Tanakh, that Shmuel wanted that his children should be brought to to leadership. It didn't happen. The children of Eli, that didn't happen. The children of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Tanakh tells us that the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu was a priest for paganism, for Pesel Micha. Can you imagine that? Well, we can imagine it. You look around. Everybody came from the yeshiva. Everybody came from the cheder. Everybody came from the shtibel. It wasn't that a spaceship landed from Mars and deposited 1 million secular Jews in Israel. That isn't how it happened. And therefore, what Akavia says, it should definitely resonate with us. Let's look at the person. Let's look at what they do. So yichus is important. I don't underemphasize it, and I don't underrate it. But it's not everything. Basically, we are what we are. And that's how we will be judged too. And as I have pointed out, many times people who come from great antecedents will probably be judged much more harshly because they didn't live up. They weren't Akavia, they didn't follow in the footsteps. They had great examples in their own family. And somehow it didn't work. Because that's the human condition. The human condition is freedom of choice. You can do whatever you want. So Avram can have a Yishmael, and Yitzchak can have an Esav, and Yaakov can have children that tear themselves apart. And the Jewish people can build an Egel. And even when the Beis HaMikdash is built, they will make a Avodah Zorah in Shechem. Yeah, you still can do whatever you want. And I think that's a great lesson. Great lesson is that you are what you are. So, what does Akavia say he is? I think that part of it lies in the three things that he said. If a mistakel b'shlosha dvorim, ve'inato bo lidei aveira. If now mistakel is an interesting verb in Hebrew. I pointed out to you many times that the Gaon of Vilna says that there are no synonyms in Hebrew. Every word is unique. There's a nuance all of its own. So it could say, habet, look at these three things. Or tachshov, think about these three things. Or tishkol, weigh in your mind these three things. There are all sorts of verbs that can be used that will pretty much convey the same idea that he wanted to say. Why did he say histakel? But the Mefarshim point out that histakel, histaklus, is to gaze intently. In other words, a habit can be with a flash, even with peripheral vision. But histakel is to analyze, to look at it carefully. And therefore, it's connected to the word seichel. It's not just the physical eye that sees, it's the mind that considers, that thinks about it. And therefore, he said, these are three things that it's not enough to look at cursorily. It's not enough to think that, well, you know, I saw something. But to analyze it, then the basic rule of science as we know it today, and medicine and all of the advances that we have in our more modern world, is because people looked at things. They looked at things that they couldn't even see. Why does the atom, what, where does it flow? Where's it going? What is energy? So people who think superficially are never troubled by that. The genius of people is the ability to ask why. Try and find out why. Einstein's famous example is that he was a child. He imagined what would it be to ride a light wave into space, a beam of light into space. What would he see? What would happen to the light when it reaches space? Well, that's genius. That eventually leads him to theories about energy and time and light, etc. But if you don't think that way, what do you mean? I want to know what the number bus goes to the Merkaz or to the Tachana Merkazita. That's all I'm interested in. What do I care about light? And that really is a dividing line. And it also exists, it's not limited to science. It's part of Jewish tradition. It's part of the halacha. I think that's part of the reason why Jews, even Jews that were far away from religion, nevertheless had a religious view of science. Of asking why. You'll see, to look in the Talmud. The Talmud, the Mishnah states a fact, and the Gemara immediately says, "Manohani mile." Where did I get this from? Why? Why? Prove it to me. If you can't prove it to me, I'm not going to, who knows what it means. We're talking about the holy words of Moshe, the words of the Torah, the words that God gave him on Sinai. What do you mean? It's a chutzpah to say why. Oh, no. That's the beauty of it. Lilmod Lamed, the Torah gave us the ability to think about things, to explore things. And that's our nature. That's why we're such a querulous people. Because we always are saying, where did you get this from? Why? Why should I listen to you? Who are you? Let me think of it myself. Let's contemplate it. Yeah, people don't like this because we prefer to be conformists. It's very popular to use the word herd today. So the herd instinct. Everybody does it, so I do it. But that's not the Torah way. The Torah way is, Rabbi Akiva said that life is an ocean, a sea, and everyone is in his or her own vessel, ship, and everyone has to cross the sea, and there is no highway that exists there. You have to make your own way. And those are the tests of life, especially the tests that we're undergoing now. Who could have imagined a situation like that? How can you be Jewish? You can't go to shul, you can't daven, you can't meet anybody. You get Pesach, make a Seder by yourself. Kol dichvin Yosef Yechel, let everybody come in. Nobody come in. Well, let's see. It says in Shiur HaShirim, and again, we didn't hear read publicly. Harenius Hashminius Kole, Harenius Marayich. Let's hear your voice. Let's see what you look like. So the Medrash says this is on the posuk Yonosi Bechag Be'asela B'Seiser Hamadregot. My beloved, the little bird is in the cleft of the rock. So the Medrash says it's in the cleft of the rock. It cannot go into the rock because there the weasel is waiting to devour it. And it cannot go outside because there the eagle is waiting to capture it. And then God says, now let's see what you do. Let's see what you look like now. What are you made of? What stuff? So all of us have these challenges in our personal lives. Nobody escapes life without challenge, and God forbid, without tragedy. All of us. So now what do? Now what happens? And all of that is part of his takel. Let's look at the whole thing. So Akavia says, let's look at three things. And these three things, Einatoboli de Avera. You will not come into the hands of transgressing over God's will. Now, it's interesting that Avera here is personalized. It's not an abstract. It's something that has hands. It's something that grabs you, holds on to you. It's hard to escape from. That's why Chazal said that the person that repeats the same Averas over and over again at the end doesn't think that he did an Avera at all. Nasalo Kayater. I didn't do anything wrong. Yes, because our ability to rationalize our own behavior is limitless. Just reading, it was read to me by my son-in-law over Yontiv, a book. One of the chapters was regarding the terrible Yom HaShoah is coming, so descriptions of Nazi killers who were normal people. It's what she called the banality of evil. They all went home at night and they ate dinner with their children. They're completely normal people. When you saw Eichmann in the box at the trial, he looked, he looked like the clerk next door at the post office. You didn't see any fangs or horns. So even murder becomes commonplace. It becomes accepted. The problem in life is that a lot of things become accepted. And once they become accepted, it is very hard to uproot them. It is very hard to change because that's just the way it is. And we are creatures of habit. So there can be good habits. Maybe that's why Leficha Chir B'Lahem Torah mitzvos. We have so many mitzvahs to do to try and put us in good habitual behavior. And there are other habits, and habits eventually become addictions. And addictions eventually become self-destructive to the extent that people lose life itself. So all of that Akavia is telling us. Histakel. Look at all these three things, but don't look at it cursorily. Figure it out so that you don't fall into the hands of Avera. Because the truth of the matter is that we, in our conscience, know what is right and what is wrong, what is moral and what is immoral, what is eternal and what is not. All of this is present within us. The Lord implanted within us. The same B'Libeinu, we said, put it in our hearts. That we should have a Yetzer Tov. And we should take the Yetzer Hara and make it work for us. That's really the trick in life. To make the Yetzer Hara our servant instead of our master. So what are the three things? So me'ayin bosa, where'd you come from? So he says metipa srucha, from a drop of semen that has a very short life. That's where you come from. And the Lord could have made it much more glorious. You see in other faiths, lahavdil elef havdolas, that they had to invent all sorts of weird theories not to admit that we're human, that's where we came from. You have The whole idea, immaculate conception, all of these things are just a denial of life because it's very humbling. It's very humbling for me to think of my father and mother in that respect. So the idea of humility, that's the first thing and that represents Akavia. He's humble. I don't want to be the head of the Sanhedrin. I'm not willing to sacrifice my integrity for it. My pursuit of power and fame has limits. So hubris, arrogance, that's the first killer. Because when that happens, so then ani v'afsio, there's nothing else in the world but me. And there's plenty in the world that doesn't want to accept that there's nothing but me. Now, everyone has to have self-respect. Everyone has to have an ego. Everyone has to have a self-confidence, a view of oneself. But there are limits. And we all, it's been pointed out many times, all of us know that the greatest compliment to Moshe Rabbeinu is Onod Mikol Adam. He doesn't have any hubris in him. And if anybody had the right, so to speak, or the justification for that, that was Moshe. His face shines. You can't look at him. He exists in Sinai without eating and drinking. He performs miracles. But he's still Moshe. That's who he is. And he never said that I'm the only one in the world. So Akavia, in his own personal life, is an anti-hubris man, so to speak. He's not willing to give in because of pride. And he says, if you look in the world, if you think about it, I am bossa. Take it easy. And this ability to view yourself in that fashion has a great deal of eternity to it. I remember my teachers in the yeshiva. I was once witness to the great rabbi came, and he was a Gaon, and he started to say a shiur. He started to deliver a lecture on a Talmudic subject, and he was in the middle of it, and you could see where he was going, and he was building it beautifully. And one of the rabbonim there interrupted him, and he said, but this and this and this. And when he said that, the man said, you know, you're right. And he closed the Gemara, and he thanked us for listening, and he went down from the podium. That was greatness. To be able to admit publicly that maybe you're not right, and you've prepared this lecture. Now, that has never happened to me, but nevertheless, it's a lesson. It's a greater lesson than the lesson that he wanted to teach. And so that's my ayam basa. What people feel, especially when we are younger, that we are immortal. Chaim used to say that there's a group of people, a chevre used to say, it was a chevre starbers, a group of people who died, but I'm not a member of that group. But we are all members of that group. We are all subject to mortality. So just as in other religions we find the idea of somehow we were not created for man and woman, we find also, you don't die. The Torah says, "Vayomos Shom Moshe Eved Hashem, Vayikbar Oso Bagai, Mul Beis Bor." Moshe Rabbeinu. So there's a piyut on Simchas Torah. We don't say piyutim, and by the time it comes time to say this piyut, people have already partaken of the Kiddush, so they're not really interested in piyut anymore. But the piyut begins in the most cheerful way. Moshe meis milo yomus. Moshe died, who will not die? Because our idea of immortality is not eternal life in this world. It's the realization that we are limited. And if we think of ourselves as being mortal, so then our hubris should be compromised as well. We should have a more balanced view of ourselves. We should not, shouldn't push it to the end. So all of this Akavia explains. Because that's him, he's telling you about himself. And you have to give an accounting for life. It's not free. You got to file the income tax return. So during the year, you blithely go along, but then all of a sudden, you send it to your accountant, and the accountant comes back and he says, you have to pay this and this and this. Why? Because life is not free. Now, din v'cheshbon, there's also a famous thought from the Gaon of Vilna. Din, judgment, is on what a person does or does not do. The actions of a person. Cheshbon, that's what could have been. What was the potential there? So many times a person does something, but what he does is half-hearted, or without enthusiasm, or without realizing its importance. So he did din, but he didn't do cheshbon, because if he really would have figured it out, wow, what he could have done. What could have happened here? Again, anybody that's a student of history knows that history turns on little things. What could have been? Shakespeare wrote, my kingdom was for a horse, for a horseshoe, for a nail, for whatever. It's not the great things, it's small things that it turns on. And when it turns, so then that's our cheshbon. So a person's reckoning is not only on what he did. So let's say a person gave X amount of money to charity in his lifetime. Wonderful. He gets a reward. They pile it on the side of the positive acts that a person did. But then cheshbon comes and says, but he had the ability to do more. You made him wealthier. That was pretty good if he's only making X money, but look how much money he made. So then cheshbon diminishes what the person does, because he could have done more. And all of us can do more. That's the problem. We all know that we receive notes from our children or grandchildren's teachers. You know, Yankee he's not living up to his potential, which is a nice way of saying that he's really failing the course. But in today's world, nobody fails, so we only say he's not living up to his potential. But that's a great statement because it can be said about everybody and about every situation. Our potential is unlimited. Who could have imagined going through a yontiv the way we just went through and be Mekayim and fulfill all of the mitzvahs and be sanguine about it and appreciate it? Did we know that we had that in our potential? If we knew we had that in our potential, maybe our previous Yom Tovim would have been different. Potential is always the challenge. And that's true nationally also. It's not good enough. There are greater things that can be accomplished. Coming out to Yom Ha'atzmaut, 72 years. A long time. We accomplished a great deal in 72 years. Tremendous. But we still have a lot of way to go. It's not perfect. It's not there. Okay, good. We're going to try. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it's the Ribono Shel Olam that we are responsible to. I always used to repeat what my Rabbi used to say, that in back of the Shulchan Aruch is doch Gott. In back of the Shulchan Aruch, we're afraid of the Shulchan Aruch, want to do everything right. What's our connection to God? Is he a presence within us? How do we renew our faith? I think one of the, I can't even say positive, but one of the results of all of this is that we pray individually, and somehow in praying individually, many times I feel a greater connection than I did in the synagogue services. So that is a potential that all of us can reach. So we have here all of these statements of Akavia ben Mahalalel. And I think that by the time we've examined them, we realize he's talking about himself. And that really is true for all of Pirkei Avot. That each of these great and holy Tanoim, the people who built the Jewish people and upon whose shoulders we rest, they were talking about themselves, not only about us. It's easy to give advice to others, but physician, heal thyself. And they are the experts in healing themselves. They're telling you about themselves. So if it's istakel b'shlosh dvorim, Akavia ben Mahalalel, Wein atol de averos, so that you understand the Akavia ben Mahalalel. You understand what he was, and we therefore have a greater appreciation, not only of what he said, but of the person himself. So this has been, for me, a wonderful experience. I hope that it has been for you as well. I want to wish you all the best and good health and happiness. And Emir Hashem will have yet on Shabbos afternoon in shul, Pirkei Avot, the way we usually do, and we'll be zocha together to great and good days. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. It's really a big schus for us. For me, this time also an opportunity to write. On Shabbos, we don't get a chance to write the notes. Now we get a chance to even write notes. I would like to say just 2 announcements. Tomorrow night, we're going to be meeting. We're sending out a special, it's Yom HaShoah. We're going to be sending out a special link at 8 p.m. together with Moshe Lashinsky, who's going to lead it, and the Rav Shlita is going to lead us for a special Yom HaShoah program tomorrow night. And on Tuesday, on Yom HaShoah in the afternoon, we have with us Yafa is here on the call. Everyone can see her right now, Yafa Silberberg, and she's going to be doing a special shiur, a special program. Wonderful. That is going to be on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So everyone stay posted for your emails, and we're going to be doing a special program, and we're going to be seeing the Rav tomorrow at 8 p.m. Thank you so much for everybody. Tomorrow morning, we're sent out an email for anybody who wants to know the Gemara Shiur Moed Katan, 9 a.m. in the morning. That's a shiur that I'm giving.
And Uriel is going to teach tomorrow.
Love you. Love you.
Okay, everyone is unmuted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Neighbors.
This is Hannah Weil. It's great to see you on the call over here. Hannah, it's great to see you. Judy Cohn, great to see you.
Precious.
Great to see you as well.
Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Stay
you.
well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mrs. Weil was here.
Oh,
Right there she
so much.
is. Weil. No, she's waiting for you.
Shoot.
You know what? I'm here, 36. Everything.
Yeah, we'll do a shoot tomorrow.
Right out of everything.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get out of this. Leave.
You just listened to Rabbi Wein. Did you hear him?
And then you can
It was wonderful, wonderful,
No,
wonderful.
Harriet, Florence. Is leaving.
You leave the meeting?
Galaxy J8.
Is it a mess?
You have no name on it.
All right. Okay, that's it.
Hi.
Hi. Who's this? Hi.
Yo.
Be well, sweetheart. So cute. I don't know who this is.
That's you?
I'm thinking, no, I will. It's like,
Okay, well, who's left? How many people are
I'm
left?
listening.
People are left over
You gonna
here.
play it at this place?
19 people left.
18.
Okay.
80.
What's our story?
Okay. Okay, everybody. It was a real pleasure seeing everybody.
You say 18 people. 18.
Wait, I'm good.
Hi. Everybody come to
Wait,
smile.
I need my hand.
Yeah, I want 2 o'clock will be.
Yeah.
So it's really not practical for you to keep your car there all the time, you know what I mean?
Okay, we're gonna say bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.